Hello, my name's Richard. You're listening to Make Something Awful, which is a podcast about people making stuff, and it's about their personal journey, regardless of what they're doing, where they are. It's always interesting to find out kind of where they came from. Joining me today or tomorrow or yesterday, or regardless of when you're listening to this, I've got a gentleman by the name of Glen Binger, who is he's a teacher, he's a coach, he is a self-professed lifelong student. He is a person who gets his head down and he writes about all manner of different things. And he's on. We're going to have a chat because we're going to pick into the tiny corners of his mind and find out what makes him tick, what gets him going, what makes him kind of continue to pick up the pen, continue to spread the word, continue to think how he does. And also just to reaffirm, those first steps, were they gold or were they trips? So we'll see.
I don't know.
So hello, Glenn. Thank you very, very much for joining us on the show. Are you well?
Thanks so much for having me on. I am. Doing quite well. It's summertime over here in New Jersey. End of summer, I should say. We're recording this in August. How are you? I'm a good 9.2 today. It's been one of those days where everything kind of clicks on a place where the socks that I wore were the same colour, which is always a good thing. And, I managed to avoid a traffic jam, and I got some stuff done at work, which is always good. There is nothing better than driving the opposite way and seeing kind of like a traffic jam of cars and going, I could have turned left instead of turning right, and I turned left, and now I'm kind of missing these kind of things. Let's kind of start with talking about yourself as we promised we would do. Sure.
Your growing up kind of life, was that what was that like? Do you have any kind of like brothers or sisters? Were you a small family? Were you quite a large family kind of thing?
Small family. I have one brother. He's 2 years younger than I am. I grew up in New Jersey, not 2 towns from where I live now, 3 towns where I live now.
Okay.
And our family is kind of spread out all over the state of New Jersey in America over here. So the holiday dinners, we'd be going one direction one night, come home, sleep, go the next direction the next day, which is good. You get to see a different taste. Everyone always thinks of New Jersey as, Sopranos or that show on MTV, Jersey Shore. But I mean, there's culturally, it's a lot more eclectic than those television shows lead to believe. So my brother lives in Boston now. He left Jersey. My parents still live here. Yeah. Grandparents live down. They did the snowboard thing. Moved down to Florida. That whole stuff. But yeah.
Did you get to see them quite a bit? Did you get to go down and see them quite a bit then? Yeah.
So unfortunately, they did pass away recently. So before they did, we were visiting. It was kind of good. They didn't get a chance to come to my wedding, which was a little upsetting. But growing up wise, it was good to kind of do that because their place was usually the hub, right? So that's kind of where we would do like the big dinners where everyone came and that sort of thing. So I think coming from that culture, that arena of just love and gratitude for being one night, get together, have a big dinner, celebrate whatever it is, New Year's or anything. I think that kind of leads me to a lot of who and how and what I've become. If that makes sense.
Were you quite a positive kind of child? Did you have quite a positive kind of atmosphere kind of growing up? Were you the kind of the chipper, chirpy chappy kind of when you're growing up? People used to describe you as a ray of sunshine and things like that, or?
I don't know. It's tough. Like, I always get that. A lot of people, they always tell me like, you have such a positive attitude. You have a great way of looking at things. And honestly, I couldn't tell you if it was due to how I was raised. I mean, I assume that was part of it. It had to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think being a teacher kind of, helped shape that mindset as well. But I wouldn't say it's all sunshine and rainbows. There are definitely down moments. And, a lot of people have that misconception. They think of people who are positive, like never being sad or never being upset. And that's just not true. Positivity is about acknowledging the balance between the good and the bad, but, choosing your best to try to focus on the good as much as you can. And my mom did a really good job of doing that when my brother and I were kids, trying to get us to look at things through that lens.
Did she get you to kind of be quite introspective when you were kind of looking at how you were kind of reacting to things and the kind of the mood that you were taking in kind of certain situations now?
Yeah. And I honestly, when I was a kid, I wouldn't have been able to express that notion at all. I think just kind of, being a teacher and studying the psychology that I did throughout my own education, I think gives me a better way to kind of analyze and self-reflect and look at myself and my past and kind of see how it's taken form. And I think that's an important skill, especially nowadays with the world as seemingly chaotic as it is becoming with things like technology. I think it's good to be able to kind of take a second, step back, look at yourself in the mirror,
Were you, would you describe yourself as quite popular at kind of school?
Oh,
were you
no.
Okay.
No, absolutely not. I mean, don't get me wrong. I had friend groups. I was, I was talking about this with my mom the other day. I just had my annual, I do a reading series in the summer called Stories by the Sea. And I kind of get all of these New Jersey artists, musicians, poets together to kind of share some of their work stories, And I was talking to my mom afterwards, and she was saying, you have such an eclectic, not only taste in your own interests, but in who you hang out with. And I kind of looked around the room when she said that, everyone from punk poets covered in tattoos to people who own and operate businesses that are trying to, share their success stories and things like that. And I feel like when I was a kid, I was kind of the same way. I played ice hockey, right? So I was part of the ice hockey crew. I always hung out with those guys. But I also had friends who were in the school band, and we would go and I'd sit with them in their section, during the football games and stuff like that. And then I also had my art crew, the crew you made in the art room, sculpting and painting and woodworking and all that stuff. I had my publishing crew. I was on the school literary magazine. I was one of the editors. So I wouldn't really say I was popular, but I knew a lot of good people. And I think I am very grateful for that. Because again, it helped shape who I am.
Have you always been quite creative then as a person? I mean, if I gave you a piece of paper and a pen, and you say there's two types of people you give a piece of paper and a pen to, one of them will write a shopping list, and the other one will kind of draw you a bird flying over a mountain kind of thing. So, were you quite kind of practically creative, or were you the type of person that some people would maybe describe as a bit of a kind of creative, maybe a little bit of a daydreamer? If you gave you some coloured pens, you'd draw us kind of something fantastic and wonderful, but you wouldn't be able to actually tell us what the hell it was. Kind of thing.
Yeah. It's funny how because that's two different lenses of creativity, right? I mean, I always make the argument that anything you do takes some form of creativity, whether it's being a professional athlete or a professional musician. Growing up though, I've always been creative. Our attic at my parents' house is filled with all kinds of art projects I did as a kid. I think that's largely in part, my father was a carpenter construction worker. My mother was a art teacher. And I think that's kind of the culture I was raised in. And, I don't know if I was able to recognize that until I was in high school when I started taking my writing a little more seriously. But I mean, I remember very vividly being 5, 6 years old, sitting in the backyard with my mom, my brother, in the hammock, and just telling stories, like making stuff up, like staring at the clouds and making up these little, I don't know, ghost stories or banks and robbers or, anything like that. I don't think I learned how to be practical with my creativity until college. When I started focusing a little bit more on the literature, so the writing, the reading, more so than the painting and sculpting and woodworking and stuff, which I've always been creative. I've had expressions in those areas too, but somewhere along the line, I found my groove with language. And once I learned that, and once I learned how to be productive with it, it kind of just took off from there. I had some really good guidance beyond my parents. I had some really good teachers who kind of encouraged that creativity and that stuff. So I think it evolved. So it's still evolving.
Was it almost the case that your mother was the person that kind of did teach you kind of like the soaring level, like a rainbow eagle over the mountains, but your dad was saying like, you be careful when you knocking these two bits of wood together, because remember, you're using a hammer, and if that hits you in the wrong place, that's going to hurt your hand, kind of thing. Was he a bit more kind of creative, but practically creative? He knew how to kind of get stuff done, and he was a measured man. Not to say he wasn't, caring, loving guy, but, he would be the guy that would sort your car if it was broken. He'd be the guy that would be putting up some shelves if you needed it in your room, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Whereas your mum would help you decorate the shelves, or she would make sure that you had one of the nodding kind of dog things in the kind of the seat of your car or something like that.
Right. Yes, I mean, first, that was very elegantly put. I think, my mother did a really good job of being able to extract that creativity and culture it and grow it. Whereas my father, had a little bit different of a mindset with his creativity and kind of taught you how to use it in a more practical sense. And like I said, I don't think either one of those is wrong or bad. I think together it's like a superpower that we're all capable of. It's just a matter of, some people learn how to hone and tone it a little bit better than others. And I'm very grateful for my parents, where they knew I could go and where they chose to kind of push and help me kind of cultivate that, because I don't think I would be where I am without them. And I know that's something that all children say about their parents, but it's one of those things. It's like everyone's experience is different, and you're going to experience things for good and for bad, and learning how to deal with those in a creative and a practical manner that's life. That's the only way you're going to be able to succeed and get out of here.
You mentioned the art, you mentioned the sculpting, you mentioned kind of different areas of creativity. Were you kind of using a scattergun approach to kind of find out what thing kind of made you tick before you landed on the writing? Or was it the case that the writing just seemed to kind of rise naturally above everything else in terms of what you were kind of doing, what you were enjoying, finding yourself drawn to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say there was definitely a period of at least 10 years where I was kind of figuring things out. I mean, I've always written. One of our wedding gifts, well, it was more a gift for me. My mom gave me this journal that I kept when I was 4 years old, and it was terrible handwriting and but there was, in that journal, there were stories that I'm reading now as an adult, thinking to myself, wow, you were able to kind of piece together a character and a plot at 4 or 5 years old. But that part of your childhood is figuring out what you're good at, right? And some people don't figure that out until they're in college, which is not unnatural, unnormal. I would say I experimented in many, many different forms. Anything. I mean, there was a whole period where I was I played in bands, punk bands and ska bands and rock bands and all kinds of stuff throughout high school. I went through a skateboarding period. Once I figured out I wasn't good at that, though, I called it quits. It hurts when you fall, folks. Not like surfing.
Yeah, no.
Surfing doesn't hurt as much. But yeah, I mean, those are all forms of creativity, and like you kind of, once you figure out what you're into, what you're passionate about, you kind of naturally do this, like you gravitate towards it, whether or not you even realize it. And then you open your eyes one day and you're like, oh, it's been 5 years and I've written, 5 books. That's crazy. I wouldn't have guessed that 5 years ago, And I think you also got to remember the path's not over. We're doing this podcast. I just finished, I think it was like my 7th little chapbook here. I'm not done. Of course, there's going to be life things. Like my wife and I are looking at buying a new house right now. And that's going to take away a piece of time. But like I still have these ideas, these projects, these things that are in my in the back of my mind, slow burning, cooking back there. That I'm like, I have to do this, And I think that's part of the journey.
What did you do at college then? What was it? Was it you studied? What was it they call majored in? I think.
So in New Jersey, like in order you have to be certified to be a teacher, right? So I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. I didn't know what I wanted to teach, and I think as I got older through high school, I kind of realized like I was good at reading and writing, and I had a really really amazing English teacher my senior year, Ms. Morio. If you're listening, shout out. She kind of helped me realize that. Number one, I enjoyed reading and writing, but also that I had some talent there. So then when I went to college and I was like, well, what do I want to teach? I kind of, decided to focus on the reading and writing. So I actually ended up with a dual major in English and in education, secondary education.
All right, okay.
So I teach in a middle school here in New Jersey, and I teach reading and writing. So that's what I'm good at. And I do all kinds of stuff. I mean, I coach the ice hockey team at my school. We do I teach art classes in the summer, in the off time, stuff like that. My wife owns an art studio where she teaches her own classes. So, sometimes I'm even helping out in her domain. She's more of like the name of her company is DIY Paradise. She's more in like the crafting studio business kind of thing, but it's still like teaching. Right. And I feel like that's the other end of my creative spectrum there is like, yes, I like to read. I like to write. I like to make poetry and make art and things, but I also like to help people. I like to teach anything that I know to pass it on. So hopefully someone else can use it and help themselves become better. And I think that's kind of like, I wouldn't have known that in college, but I think that's always kind of been the direction that I've been leaning towards.
So is part of the reward of being a teacher when you're teaching? I mean, what age are the kids that you're teaching at the moment?
I'm in middle school right now, so anywhere from 12 to 14, I guess. Yeah,
12
maybe
to
11
14.
if they're early in the year. But,
so are these kids
it's an awkward age.
Are they kids that kind of like they're starting to learn how to express themselves because obviously they've got over the main hurdle of learning how to read and write? Or are you still do you still see that? Are you still, do you get a mixture of kind of aptitudes in terms of the class? Do you get some kids that come to you which are, they're well at the bottom in terms of being able to grasp the kind of the read and writing thing? They have frustrations because they can't express themselves. And at the same time, do you have kids that you're like, damn, if I give you enough time and enough paper, you'd be writing me the next kind of Hunger Games or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Middle school is such a weird age. I even try to think back, like when I was in middle school, I was all over the place. Boy Scouts, ice hockey, baseball, and then also surfing, skateboarding, writing, painting, like all of these things, just trying to figure it out. And, now that I'm in a position where I'm a classroom teacher, I'm more apt to recognize that, right? So in my classroom, I know I have like student X who's really, really understands how to read and write and think on this metaphorical level and has no problem connecting dots that aren't really there. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, you might have student A who knows what they want to say, knows exactly how they want to say it, but are unable to put it into words. And it's a matter of trying to find, this is my teacher hat right here, but trying to help students realize what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and how to improve the things they want to improve, right? So like, okay, you recognize that you're not good at writing. What are we going to do about it? How can we get better? Here's what I do. Here's what I would do. Here's what I can do to help, right? Now, again, my specialty is in reading and writing, but middle school, you remember, like, it's not just about the content area. It's about learning, like you said, learning how to be a student, learning how to learn from your own mistakes. So that's a component of at least being a middle school teacher that is often overlooked. And I gotta say, it's really inspiring when you get a student, a kid who it clicks for them. Doesn't always happen, but they'll be experimenting in their free write journal or something, and something will just happen, and they'll come to me the next day and just, I get it. I understand this now. This is so easy. Being able to help contribute towards that is nothing like it. I see that in adults too. I work with the community, like I was saying about my wife with her DIY paradise. She just made this. She had a class on teaching how to make these sea glass wind chime things, right? And they were, one of the girls in the class, like, just, she was getting frustrated because she couldn't figure out how to get the wire around the shell correctly. And my wife kind of like went over and like talked her through it, like sat down, like, this is how I normally do it, but maybe this doesn't work for you. And then like by the end of the class, this woman, like, was wrapping them 3-4 at a time, like got right through it. And like, it like clicked through her in that class. And I don't even know if she was able to recognize that, but from the teacher standpoint, like seeing something like that, seeing a person really like something clicks, it goes off. Like, I don't know. There's something about that that really inspires me to want to become better at whatever it is that I am. Writer, reader, teacher, coach, whatever.
Do you find that you're, with the stresses and strains that the education system is kind of under, and this seems to be like an international thing, not just like a localized kind of thing, that you end up becoming like the counselor, that you're not just the person that's saying, okay, this is how you cross an I and dot a T, but the education system expects you to do more as a kind of a teacher, to almost be a kind of like a semi-counselor. You're kind of handed more and more things to kind of deal with. I know with the education system over here, we have classes where sometimes the kids are given more, the kids with certain challenges are certainly given support, but they try to put them into kind of like the mainstream education, which means it can put an awful lot more pressure on a teacher rather than imparting knowledge. It's almost like they're having to bring in the kind of the counselling, the kind of the coach, the kind of the guidance, the kind of almost like in some cases, a slight substitute kind of parental figure in people's lives. Do you see that more and more as you've kind of progressed in your career in kind of teaching, or do you have to draw a line and say, look, I can't do this, I can teach you how to do this, but I can't be anything more than that?
It's such a tough question. I honestly, I feel like the educational system, because ours it's similar in that fashion, but the way things are still set up, like I'm really, by my contract, I'm only supposed to be teaching how to read and write. Right? That's I'm a teacher of English. That's my job. But what I'm noticing, at least the past couple of years of my career, I feel like our educational system as a whole needs a revamp to adapt itself to that need. Right? Because like I said, I mean, kids today are exposed to so much information, most of which they don't even know of. They don't even know that they're being given information. And then on top of that, some of it's incorrect. Some of it is false. And there's no one teaching them how to kind of think through this and say, oh, this is a credible source, I can read this article or watch this video and like understand it as truth, versus, watching a video and saying, no, this is fake. I know this is incredible. It's not a trustworthy source. So you're kind of, as a teacher, you're kind of walking a fine line. You have to teach them your content, of course, right? Science teacher has to teach them how to do the science experiments and work through that scientific method. But at the same time, like, what is it we're actually practicing here? Yes, we're conducting experiments in the classroom, or yes, we're writing an essay, but really the core system that we're trying to work through is how to think about what it is we're trying to express, right? And it's tough in middle school because by the time you get to high school, like most kids have themselves figured out somewhat, right? They have an idea, a direction. But middle school, it's like all about finding that direction. And I think it really takes a community to kind of help like one child, an individual, figure that out. Parents, teachers, guidance counselors, coaches, even, acquaintances, the neighbors, dentists, doctors, all of those things. People forget that, the brain is, especially at that age, the brain is constantly learning, whether or not they even realize it. And I think it's important as a teacher to kind of help, remind the youth, remind students who are growing up in a culture that is evolving faster than the one you or I grew up in to think that way and see things that way, because that's a fact. Things are changing so fast. We got to be able to adapt to that. So
yeah, I don't think it's generational either. I don't think it's kind of like in my day, because I am an old man. People used to talk about, it used to change maybe every kind of like 5-10 years. There would be a slight culture shift. I mean, I think the last major one that I remember was, I was there when the birth of the internet was there. I remember looking at it.
Yeah.
I remember the birth of mobile phones being a huge, huge thing. And people carrying around these half-brick mobile phones, and that was a massive thing. It seems now that the culture shift is almost a case of, it's not things that make massive changes, it's little increments, and it's almost getting to the point where it's microsystems of a fear of missing out and things like that, which I can't, for someone like you, it must be so kind of difficult. Do you have to learn what's kind of going on? Do you have to then jump into Fortnite and learn how to play that so you can be down? Do you feel you have to be down with the kids instead of balancing up being an authority figure almost?
It's tough because, like, on one hand, like you said, like, you kind of have to have an authority figure, right? Like, that's part of my job, is to like kind of make sure things are going the way they're supposed to be going. But at the same time, like, I understand the reality of what I'm doing. I'm working with human beings, right? They're not robots.
Yeah.
In order to be the best at my job, I have to be able to learn about things like Fortnite or, Apex or what, I don't know, whatever the latest game they're playing is right now. I'll find out in September. Ask again in a month here, and I'll let you know. But you have to be open to that kind of stuff, because the fact of the matter is that's part of the reality, right? Kids are experiencing those things. They're going home and playing 4 hours of Fortnite instead of doing their homework. And, yes, that's a problem, but like yelling at the kid for doing that isn't going to solve anything. You gotta help them understand like why that's not a good choice. Why we should spend some time doing homework before playing the Fortnite. So, I don't know. It's that open mindset. You have to be open and willing to adjust and adapt. And I think these days it's becoming a lost art. And it's funny too, like you mentioned being around, like remembering the birth of the internet. And I was actually talking about that with my wife, I want to say last night or the night before. Like my generation, I'm 32 at the moment, just to put this in perspective, but my generation was one of the last to kind of experience and grow up in a world without that constant connection. Whereas kids now, like, that's all they know. My niece, she knows how to like video chat call us up from her mom's phone and we think it's her, and it's like, boom, it's my niece calling, like with 3 swipes. She's 3 years old, by the way. It's crazy. It's crazy. And like, you got to be aware of that. Like, the world that kids are growing up in now is not the same. And if we don't adjust the way that we help kids understand that, it's not right.
I think, what did I see today? I saw, and I don't know if it's real or not, but I saw somebody kind of like post up, that they had just been banned from all their electronic devices. So they had managed to get connected to Twitter through their old 3DS that they had. And then their mother kind of found out about it. And the next thing, is to say, I don't know if this is even going to send or it's going to work. But just to let you know that, I'm totally on an electronic ban at the moment. I'll get back on as soon as I can. And it was in the Twitter thing, it says it was sent from the LG refrigerator.
Oh my God.
So and they're just like always connected kind of all the time.
Yeah. And it's crazy. Like a refrigerator connected to the internet. Like, as a parent, you wouldn't even think of that, Like
I just want somewhere I can get my milk out of, please, thank you very much, kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
How do you keep the energy up then from being in a job where you are coaching, teaching, imparting life wisdom onto young minds, to sitting down then and actually writing about it? I mean, when did, when you first started writing, was it a conscious decision to start writing? Because I know some people kind of sit down and go, right, here we go, Game of Thrones, Chapter 1, Jon Snow looked over, and then the next thing they've written kind of 7 books or whatever.
Right.
But for you, was it a case of, did you start kind of putting down the thoughts kind of organically, and did they just end up kind of turning into a collection of writing, or was it a conscious decision that you made from the beginning?
I think when I started, like I was mentioning earlier, I think when I started writing, it just kind of, it was like word vomit, to quote Mean Girls, right? It just started coming out of me. It was like on the paper. This is before phones and stuff, where you actually had to write,
yeah, not
type. But then, like I said, like once I started taking it seriously in college and trying to get published and this is 2007, 2008, trying to get published on the internet in print and things like that. That's kind of when I sat down and I kind of thought about, how can I organize this into a collection that doesn't just seem like that word vomit, right? How does it put together and become something with a purpose, with a meaning, with a message? And I think I still struggle with that a little bit, but I mean, that's definitely my focus now. Trying to piece together something to help, I guess, demonstrate or show my experience on this planet. Leave something behind, make something awful. That's your thing, right? Like trying to make things, even if they're awful, like trying to make something to help share my experience, because maybe someone out there might better from it.
That's it. I mean, that's the whole idea behind it. I mean, I think I hate the fact that there's so much monetization going on.
Yeah, me too.
That in order for somebody to be successful, it is based upon, I mean, okay, look back at Game of Thrones, okay? Your man that wrote Game of Thrones.
Well, not the last season, right? We're skipping over
they
that.
I've watched 1.5 episodes of that entire show. Okay, come at me with your fire internet. I don't care. But those books were sitting there obviously for years, kind of thing. Yeah.
Right.
And they'd obviously, some people had picked them up, and it was only until the TV show, and it only became the greatest thing ever produced when it started to make a lot of money. It was the same with Harry. It was the same with Harry Potter.
Yep, I remember that.
Harry Potter only became really, really good. I mean, if you look back, and my concern about is that you could be imparting wisdom and it could be fantastic, but because you're not famous enough or big enough or making enough money out of it, that it's not seen as successful, but on the same time, yeah, everybody expects their content for free. So how are you meant to make any, it's like you could, if I was cynical, I could say, well, why have you written the books that you've written? Why aren't you just putting that out on Medium, for instance, so I can read it whenever I want? Why are you expecting me to kind of pay for it, kind of thing? And it's like it's kind of like a strange thing. I mean, when you're writing stuff, Glenn, are you writing it for yourself, or are you writing it for other people? Are you writing it to get people to look at it and buy it, or are you writing it because I'm a mortal person, therefore there's a chance that in the next 100 years, I'm definitely going to die. So I've got thoughts I want to kind of get out there. Let's get these thoughts out there, kind of thing.
Yeah. In my guts, for me, it's about just expressing, just getting that, whatever it is inside of me, that light, that brightness, whatever you want to call it, putting it out into the universe in a way that makes sense to me. Money's never really been a part of the equation for me. Yet at the same time, if I was in J.K. Rowling's position and someone presents this contract to me, we're going to make sure you're taken care of. We're going to make all your books into movies. I'm not going to say no to that. But that's not the goal, right? The goal for me is to kind of express what it is going on inside my head. My piece of reality. This is how I see the world. This is how I want to change the world. With something as fictional as Harry Potter or Game of Thrones, like, of course that's not reality, but that's a piece of George R.R. Martin's brain, right? Like that's a thought that he had that he turned into like this empire. And I don't know if I can't speak for him. Like, I don't know if that was the end goal for him. For myself, I try not to focus that far ahead. Cause who knows if that's going to happen or not. I read this fantastic book last summer by the author Ryan Holiday. It's called Perennial Seller. And it talks about timeless classics, no matter the medium, books, movies, whatever. But one of the points he was trying to make in that is, with the right marketing, of course, you can kind of build anything. But in order for something to really reach the hearts and souls of many, many, many humans, there needs to be heart and soul in it, right? Yeah. And if you're trying to make something without that heart and soul, just for the likes or the comments or the shares, that's going to live and die with the internet. I mean, think about all of the memes you've ever seen, right? Like, those come and go all the time because they're quick. They make you laugh for a second, but you're not going to remember them 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years from now, right? Whereas I read Siddhartha when I was in middle school, and I still remember that book. Not one of my favorites, but I remember it. You could tell, like, Herman Hesse, he's writing that book, and he has his heart and soul in that. The same thing with, like, Coelho and The Alchemist, right? Like, that book withstood the test of time because there was heart and soul in that book, right? And yes, now he's making money off of it because all the podcasts always recommend it. But But there's a reason they're recommending it, right? So I try to think of that when I'm making something, writing a book, a poem, an essay. Yeah, heck, even lesson plans, right? When I'm trying to design a lesson, like, there's a sense of creativity in that where, like, how am I going to help the students best understand what it is I'm trying to teach if I'm just trying to sell it to them, right? People see through that. People can see through an ad. Granted, they are becoming a lot more complex these days, but if you're treating your art like that, no matter the medium, it's never going to withstand that test of time. You got to have that heart and soul. I mean, that's what makes art. Are
you a notebook by the bed type of person? Have you always got like a pen and a piece of paper handy so you can jot down kind of ideas, or do you just let the creativity strike you, or do you set aside time and say, okay, let's get some stuff written, let's get some stuff penned and stuff?
I think I'm an anomaly in this situation. it's tough with the teaching schedule. We were talking about this before. Like, there are times when I come home from school and I am drained. There's nothing getting done. You know, I'm plopping on the couch and that is it for the night. On the other hand, there are moments where I have to like kind of schedule in some time and say, okay, well, you know, I need to edit this manuscript by this day. So that means every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., I'm going to be editing, right? And I could set that plan, but it's not always going to adhere to that. You know, life always gets in the way somehow.
Yeah.
So I kind of like to think I'm kind of both in that scenario, right? Like, before cell phones, I always carried a moleskin on me, one of those little pocket moleskins. With cell phones, now as prevalent as they are, it's a lot easier to just jot down something you have in mind. I mean, even if it's a little voice note for yourself later. And I think a lot of the things that I've written and organized kind of just started out as that, you know? Oh, like, well, what if this guy goes into a coma and, you know, he thinks it's real life, right? And that turned into my book Figment that I wrote a couple years ago. Like, you know, you can't limit yourself. I feel like if you limit yourself, you're limiting your potential. And I'm not saying don't focus. Of course, if you want to find success in your driven medium, like, of course you have to focus and set a goal for yourself. But at the same time, if you're not in that final stage of composure where you're like trying to piece together your final manuscript, right? If you're just starting out, you're just trying to form your collection of poetry or whatever it is, you can't limit yourself, right? It's going to restrict the inhibitors. It's going to restrict the flow, and you're never going to reach that flow state. But like I said, at the same time, you also need to schedule time to kind of do the boring stuff, the marketing, the graphic design for the book cover if you're self-publishing. I don't know. Researching, for whatever.
Is that tough then? Is it? I mean, it's a different thing because it used to be the case. This is me showing the age. You would write something, and there would be literally agents who would you take your manuscript along. They would check it out, and then they would say, "Right, this looks fantastic. Here's a contract. We'll get it sorted out. We'll deal with all the publicity and everything like that." And you just go away and you just edit. Nowadays, and in my job, dealing with Amazon, I speak to a lot of authors. You know, the people who are saying, "Well, how? I've got my book on Amazon. How do I make it more popular than it is? How do I get people kind of reading it?" And you're an author, but you're never told how to be a marketer. Nobody sits down and says, "Well, you got to hit this person. You got to get this person can do it. If you can get this person looking at your book and reviewing it, then you get this person looking at it and reviewing it, and therefore, and do this, and join this group, and be in this Facebook group, and be visible here, and be on Twitter." And nobody actually sits you down and says, you don't just have to write the story anymore. You don't just have to come out with the ideas or put the prose out there. You've got to be everything now.
Yeah,
and for a lot of people, I wonder how many excellent pieces of writing we are not going to see because these people just don't know how to do it, don't know how to get the word out there, and that kind of that is a very kind of sad, kind of a sad kind of state of affairs.
A whole other piece of anxiety, and I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with that open-mindedness. Things are, like we said, things are always evolving and changing. You have to be willing to and open to learn how to adapt to those things. Self-publishing wasn't a thing 10 years ago. No. Maybe you had a blog, and sure, you publish it online, but like, what are the chances of your blog being read? Unless you get all of those shares. Self-publishing now, you wrote the book, you designed it, and awesome, you made this sweet cover, or you paid someone for the cover, but now what? Right? There's this whole other skill set where you have to kind of like learn how to market, how to promote, and not seem like an asshole when you're doing it. Like, I deleted my Facebook because I was tired of getting sold things by people who I thought were my friends, and they were just kind of using Facebook for that. You know what I mean? Like, There's
a popular there's a joke in the tabletop community, which is you get a friend request and it's like, hi, and you go, how do we know each other? It's like, oh, we kind of don't really, but I've just launched this on Kickstarter, and you're just like, okay,
all right, delete. Yeah, right.
Okay, I'll just ignore that kind of thing.
And like, there's a right way and a wrong way to approach that too. Like, of course you want to share your art, whatever it is, a book, your newest album or single or whatever it is. And there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. Like, you don't want to just bombard your friends with your links, right? No one's going to ever look at those. There's strategies and stuff. Another great book that I'm reading right now, also by Ryan Holiday, it's called Trust Me, I'm Lying. And he talks about how to he uses the word manipulate the media. I don't like saying that because it sounds negative, but how to kind of approach those things from a standpoint where it's going to give your work attention without you bombarding your friends with links, right? And I think that's a fine line. It's very hard to do that, especially this day and age where, like, what's the average lifespan for an article? It's like 5 minutes and then on to the next thing. Something like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
is your wife good at motivating you and getting you to keep going?
Yes.
I mean, because that's one of the things is, like, how do you measure success? And I measure success I'll measure success of this show by the conversation that we had.
Yeah.
And that's how I'll measure it, because I'm in that place now where, at the beginning it used to be kind of like, download numbers and reach. And once you've done, as I said, I've done over 300 episodes on the tabletop podcast that I do. So I'm beyond that now. I kind of don't think about it. I measure the success of a thing because of how the experience that I had while I was doing it, because I'm not going to be a millionaire podcaster. There isn't such a thing. I mean, even the guys that run some of the biggest tabletop podcasts out there are only really making money through kind of offshoots of products and stuff like that, and different things as well. Does your wife kind of help support you in that kind of manner?
It's so easy to fall into that trap too, especially this day and age, like counting the likes, the comments, the downloads, checking your stats. Like, it's so easy to fall into that trap. And I think this goes back to, what we were talking about earlier, trying to teach the youth how to kind of see through the veil almost, right? You're an aspiring artist, but your success is only determined by you. No one else can tell you you're successful or not. And have any validity behind it without your approval, right? So if you want to write a book and your only goal is to write and publish that book, which is entirely possible these days, and you do it, you're successful. Doesn't matter how many people buy it. But, on the other side of that coin, like, some people do set the goal, okay, well, now I want to sell 100 copies of this book. All right, that's an awesome goal to have, but, there's a different strategy to attain that goal. Being aware of that is the first step. I mentioned my reading series we had the other day, Stories by the Sea. Yeah. And I was talking with my buddy Scott Ladowdy. We were talking about, like, numbers and stuff and the Instagram algorithm change. And we were just kind of, him or I are neither one of those kind of people that, like, give a crap about that stuff. But I know there are people out there whose entire careers are built on those numbers and built on how many likes and shares they get, right? And it's so easy to kind of fall into that trap because, I'll get sponsored and I'll get paid if I get, 100,000 followers on Instagram. It's like, okay, that's great, but, like, is that really where you should be spending your time? Or, do you want to spend your time dedicating it towards the art you're trying to create? Right. And Scott and I were kind of having this conversation talking about how easy it is to fall into this trap and, like, get obsessed when whatever platform changes their algorithm. And then all of a sudden you're not getting any likes. You're not getting any shares. And if you're not careful, I mean, that could create some distress, some depression. And you got to be able to look past that and, like, look at yourself authentically and realize, like, what it is you're there for. What are you trying to do? Right. Like, for me, I'm, like we were just talking about, I'm trying to put my art into the world because it's coming from my heart. It's coming from my soul. It's how I see the world. Yeah. It's how I want to express myself. But I'm not doing that to get shared on Instagram. I'm not doing that to get reviewed so I can be like in the top 10 category on Amazon. And those would be nice. Sure, I'm not going to say no to those things, but that's not the reason I do this. So it's a fine line.
Does your wife ground you through that process as well?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remind each other that the reason that you're doing this? No, it's fine. I mean, it's your show. So
absolutely. She is my anchor. We had this little thing. We always go back and forth. She keeps me close to the edge and I keep her from falling off. That's our little couple thing. But it's entirely true. I mean, there are times where I'll slip down that slope and I'll be like checking the stats and I'm like, oh man, yesterday this like got, 10 views and this one got like 100 2 months ago. What's the deal? And she'll just kind of refocus me and be like, all right, is that really what you're really worried about that right now? Why don't you sit down and finish, the chapter you were working on or finish the poem you were trying to edit, whatever it is. And it's good to have someone like that on your team. It's not always going to be your significant other. I mean, it could just be an internet friend you met, someone you message back and forth. I saw this thread on Reddit the other day. It was about these two guys who've been gaming on Xbox since the original Xbox, which was 12, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that.
At least, yeah.
And they had just met, like the picture on Reddit was of them, and they had just met for the first time in person. And I was looking at that and I was like, that's awesome. You had someone who like you never had a chance to connect with in IRL, in real life, until now, yet that person still had enough drive to kind of keep you on track, right? And of course, like, gaming was their passion. Awesome. Go with it. They had the outlet to kind of help them continue whatever it was they were trying to accomplish, right? In my case, it's my awesome wife keeping me on track. There are some things like trying to balance the school work life versus the writing and reading life. It's tough. I'll come home sometimes with a stack of things I got to grade, and there will be no time to do anything. I mean, like, shoving my dinner down as I'm trying to finish grading, Like, and it's tough because, I come home and, like, I have this idea, I want to write this story, but I also have to grade all these papers, so I guess I'll have to hold on to that till later. And my wife does a really good job of trying to keep that balance. You've been grading for 6 hours, 5 hours. It's Saturday. Why don't you take a break and go read a book or something? Yeah. So,
yeah, just go ahead and do something else. Get outside.
Right.
Kind of thing. Is there a piece of writing or a piece of work that you're particularly proud of that if people are going through and say, "Oh, you're a writer, what should I be looking at first?" I mean, is there a piece that you're kind of like, yeah, I'm really proud of this piece. This is kind of help, kind of like what I would say would define me as a writer kind of thing. This is what I'm trying to give to the world. Is there any of your pieces that you feel strongly about that?
It's so tough because each one is its own little baby, Like it's you loved it. You raised it. You turned it into something. It's so hard to pick one. It's like asking, who's your favorite child?
People asking me my favorite podcast. Exactly. Right. What's your favorite podcast episode? I'm just like, they're all my children. All, right. I'm not going to turn around and say they're,
That's my go-to. I get that in class. All the kids will ask, who's your favorite student? And I'll say, you're all my favorite student.
And then just go, to you, my father, except you.
Yeah, right. Except you, because you threw stuff across the room yesterday. My father, growing up, whenever my brother and I, like, joking around, would ask, he would say the opposite. He'd say, "Oh, I like him better," like kind of like joke messing with us, It's like, "Oh no, I like," and one day it would be me, and the other day it would be him. So he'd never give like a straight actual answer, just kind of messing around. But
so what we're saying here, Glenn, is. Oh, here we go. We're getting an answer because I thought you were definitely trying to avoid the question.
No. I'll answer it. I will try and answer it. I will try. So the one that put me on the map, I feel like, goes by the same name as my reading series. It's called Enjoy: Stories by the Sea. I grew up in New Jersey. I was born and bred here. I will most likely die here. I've lived along the ocean my entire life. And when I started writing the stories in this book, I kind of realized it was bigger than just living by the ocean. It was more about being aware and present and awake and retaining your human, whatever it is that makes you human. And I'm really proud of that. That's, I want to say 2 years old this summer. It was such a big part of my own career that that's kind of the reason I started the reading series of the same name called Stories by the Sea. Because I felt so close to the book itself, I wanted to share it with people, and I wanted to hear other people's stories in the same notion. And then from there, just kind of, it grew into this thing, this network, this community of readers, writers, artists, poets, musicians, all along here in New Jersey and by the ocean, trying to erase the stigma that MTV so graciously painted us with. Because it is not like that. If you're listening, we make fun of those people. But
that is a little bit.
Yeah. It's like everyone sees like Sopranos and they think Turnpike. Like, all right, yeah, well, Turnpike's only a piece of it. But anyway, Stories by the Sea is my gift to the world to help show the world New Jersey's not as bad as all the jokes makes it seem.
If somebody approached you and said, what would be the best advice for somebody who was starting out writing? Based on what you kind of know now, what kind of advice, what would be like the little snippet of advice that you would give somebody if they said, okay, I'm going to, I've got my laptop in front of me, I've got my blank screen, I'm just about to start typing away. What would you say to these people as they start to embark on their writing journey?
Keep going and stay open-minded. There's going to be a lot of people out there, including yourself, who are going to make you think like you can't do it. You should quit. And they're all wrong. Anyone can do it. And that doesn't mean keep doing it wrong. Failure leads to success, but only if you learn from the failure. So keep going and stay open-minded. Learn the new techniques. Learn how to be better at your craft, whatever it is. You can always be better. I think it was Michelangelo said that on his deathbed. I'm still learning.
And again, I guess we always have to ask this question, which is, when you look back to the first piece of writing that you ever did, was it awful? God.
It was terrible. But that's okay. It's supposed to be. You have to make awful things. That's how good things come about. That's you're able to reflect and see the awfulness. It knows that shows you what you can fix for the next time.
Absolutely.
And that's how you get better.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much for coming on.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your time. If people want to keep an eye on you, where you are on the internet webs, where do you exist on the internet webs? Where can we find you?
On Twitter and Medium at Glen Binger, GlenBinger. Mm-hmm. I'm on Instagram at Bing Bang Books, hence the last name Binger, not Binger. I run the blog called Betterism. Can be found on Medium.
Okay.
And I have a personal blog where I like to post just like my stories, flash fiction, micro poetry, all that stuff. glenbinger.blogspot.com. Called Only Human. And I'm working on my third novel called Head Games. Trying to put that out next year.
Awesome. Well, what I'll do is we'll make sure that we put all the links into the show notes so that we've got notes to show. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, we have a we do have a Twitter account, which is under M something awful. So that's M for make, and then something awful. You can email us, which is makesomethingawful@gmail.com. If you've enjoyed what you've listened to today, and you should, because Glenn was a fantastic guest, then subscribe to the show and tell somebody else about it, because that would be fantastic. There is only a couple of things to do. The first thing is to thank you again, Glenn, for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time. Yes, and remember that, as we say, your first podcast might be awful. Your first story will be awful. Your first attempt to change an attire will be awful. Your first bit of bolognese will be awful.
And that's okay.
But it's fine, because you can't do your 50th without
that
doing
first.
It for
awful
the first
leads
time.
to awesome.
Absolutely.
Thanks again, Richard. I appreciate you so much having me on. I really do.
You're very, very welcome. And it's only left for us to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Glenn. Say goodbye, Glenn.
Au revoir. Take care and stay awesome.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, as I say, stay safe, roll sixes, and make something awful. But until the next time, goodbye.